All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin the second semi-final of Ascension number 3. IskatuMesk, as the random player, has managed, with some help by Bug and Crash, to jump straight in to the semi-finals, upsetting Darkened Fantasies, and upsetting me as well, but, you know, that's okay. We get to cast none other than the Mesk himself. I will prepare myself a lovely drink that I can then take sponsored sips from. A total side note, but I recently picked up a, utility knife type deal, and it is oddly satisfying to use it to open certain packages. That's all I'll say about that, but it's, I do recommend. It doesn't really make your life easier, but it might make your life slightly more satisfying. We are going to begin. We will jump straight into Death Spiral. The pick ban was such that the Shambler banned Infinite Velocity. Mesk banned Boskevine, a map that Shambler has a 100% win rate on, as far as tournament play is concerned. And then the Shambler banned Maim Street. So, Death Spiral, a map that Mesk has played a lot of, but not so much the case for the Shambler, is indeed where we begin our journey. And once again, there is some ambiance. I don't know if those are police siren lights or actual flashes of lightning, but you might hear some thunders. Now, IskatuMesk has rolled Terran. Terran is not necessarily a good race for IskatuMesk, but what does he have cooking? He's getting the Shambler typing and lagging. And I think he confused him with Alexander. But nonetheless, we are going to see some silly antics. Now, a single gas harvester was the case for a while here for the Shambler. But it doesn't look like he's going to go for a Stargate opener. Instead, it will be a Cenotaph. It looks like he wants to try to do a Legionnaire Flood. Now, a Fulcrum will be the choice. Vultures do okay versus Legionnaires if they can keep their distance and abuse the mines. But despite all the typing, the Shambler is still trapped in his cage. I think it goes the other way, Mesk. Well, the tournament is continuing in just about the way the manner that it left off in. See what happens there. Instantaneously going to harass the worker, but can you do it? Do you have the guts? 2 Fulcrums back-to-back means that the first unit will be somewhat delayed. I'm not 100% sure what Mesk wants to do about that. At the same time, it will be a Hierophant first, as opposed to Legionnaires, but scouting the double Cenotaph will give Mesk some idea of what he's got to deal with. Of course, there will be a Vulture opener. I'm surprised he didn't maybe wait for his, scout to confirm that there was no Stargate opener here, because obviously a Vulture wouldn't have done super well against that, but I suppose what he could have done is just surged forward with the Vulture and try to attack workers. Instead, the Hierophants will shut down early Vulture aggression due to their passive, applying a slow when withdrawing. There are 2 entrances to your base in a map like Death Spiral, 2 primary ones anyway, but you can use this to isolate on the even ground, or you can use this, of course, to use the ramp. The Hierophant has begun its grand journey. An idle mason has just been tasked onto the mineral line. All is quiet for now. Unfortunately for IskatuMesk, the Shambler has stopped typing. Will he dare charge forward? I think he will, and he will lose the Hierophant as a result. Can't leave when you've been absolutely boondangled by a lobotomy mine. That's actually a non-trivial quantity of the forces that Shambler had at his disposal, so he will be opting for a Warden, which is also going to delay his next acquisition. Looks like it will be Legionnaires, not necessarily a bad shout. However, at this stage, I think there are enough Vultures in play to potentially deal with a Hierophant menace. However, the free shots that they get courtesy of cliff advantage is notwithstanding there. There is less armor available for the Hierophant, and an offensive mine attempt is what he's going to go for, but it's not going to be good enough. And at this point, he has to consider whether or not he can fall back safely. Killing one of the mines, as he does, is not going to be sufficient, and he even gets both of his Hierophants locked up. But Mesk is a little bit too slow to go for the attack, and then is going to get punished by the slow. Well, manages to just narrowly escape. He was still technically debuffed there, but the Hierophants were far enough away that they didn't affect the, didn't actually get calculated as, oh, this is a withdrawing. So that's kind of funny, because of course the withdrawing has an aura range associated with it. The Hierophants will go ahead and charge up, and this may catch Mesk off guard, but he's got plenty of mech units here, and he even has some mines in case Shambler decides to charge on forward. Interestingly enough, opts for the wounded one, as opposed to maybe trying to surround the one that was not stunned. Generally, we are seeing pretty good play come out from Mesk and his minefields, perhaps demonstrating the lobotomy mine power, and this Hierophant is going to get hunted down until it's destroyed. A Mason is chasing with the intent of repairing, but instead he'll go ahead and move the Mason to unbuildable terrain before starting a ministry. Sometimes you just find yourself having lots of money. I suppose this ministry is well placed to cover any additional onslaughts that may occur, but instead, Shambler is remaining at home, expecting a counterattack. This map is XY symmetrical, but much like the map on the remastered ladder, Eclipse, it has one theme for one side of the map and another theme for the other. For the most part, they are identical. A Matrix and Warden are spotted, as well as a very hard committal into Cenotaph level attack. Well, it looks like Mesk is just going to try to manage the economy of his opponent by kiting back and forth, but instead is mostly being slapped on. So he doesn't manage to get any scribe kills with those 5 vultures, which is a little regrettable because he could have put himself in a pretty commanding position as far as worker count is concerned. If he gets 2 or 3 worker kills, suddenly he's up by 5 instead of only being up by 2. Still, his lead should increase in that department as soon as he remembers to actually use his Quarry and Ministry, because he's got access to double the worker queues that the Shambler has access to. That being said, I did see his screen go to the bottom right, and I think he will be going for an expansion, but opts to go for the front-facing one instead. This ministry may just finish in time to spot this force, but instead the Hierophants and the army of Legionnaires are indeed going to be moving towards the front gate. There's a Vulture, as well as a Goliath ready to join it in the anchor. There's not really that many units immediately in position here. So the Vultures up front are going to need to be pushed forward here. No opportunity to repair the anchor because it's been fully surrounded by nothing but Legionnaires. Well, at this stage, I think maybe the lobotomy mine will freeze and immediately isolate a lot of the would-be attackers there. Unfortunately, I don't think Mesk can hold on versus all of the Legionnaires. I think there's just too many, and with multiple anchors falling and no units actually popping out, I think maybe this ministry position didn't end up scouting his opponent's force. He does cancel the star pad, but I don't know if he has what it takes. All of his Masons are dying. He'll be hopelessly sent back and behind. Now the Matador might be able to deploy and light a bunch of these guys on fire, but that's going to be it. IskatuMesk has been defeated. I think maybe if he had immediately placed more mines, either somewhere on the map, but preferably in a way that he didn't already have towards his scout, right? He had placed them defensively in the open ground of his main. If he had laid more of them on the approach to the ramp, or generally speaking, had isolated where exactly the Shambler was going to approach, I think he would have at least had some advance warning and maybe been able to anticipate the sheer number of Legionnaires. But between the Ministry, and then on top of it going into scrapyards for his fulcrums, as well as a starpad transition, he didn't really have any units available, and the Shambler caught him at the exact right time to abuse that fact. So IskatuMesk will go down 0-1 in the series. But this is not unfamiliar territory for him. Keep in mind, he did reverse sweep Darkened Fantasies to even get here. So as I update the overlay, we are expecting IskatuMesk to select the next map. It does amuse me to see that IskatuMesk is the fan favorite, and everybody wants him to win. I think even Shambler kind of wants him to win. Nitro Valley is going to be selected. This is a map that IskatuMesk himself did mention, as he claims the prized third slot in the lobby. He did see the Shambler play on this map versus Ben Taberski, who is actually in the chat. Mesk and Shambler. Shambler and Mesk. Match number 2 within this semifinal. Can IskatuMesk extend the series and get on the board immediately? Only Canada can save us now. And the Shambler, once again, decides to split like Grandma. Now, IskatuMesk is Protoss, his second best race, if you ask me, and this is going to be a Stargate opener. I can already tell based on the layout of the workers. That being said, a very fast pylon, and Mesk is going to scout cross-spawn. Very early, in fact. He might be thinking of cheese. But if he doesn't find his Nemesis in this location, will he go to the left or down south, far away from his opponent? This hard-boiled analysis and more after this sponsored sip. I tried to make that really obnoxious and sounding so that you guys could actually hear the sponsored sip, but I think OBS removed most of it because I have a subtle compressor on there and limiter. Either way, there's a gateway on the way for IskatuMesk, and he will confirm that there is indeed no Protoss here in the top right. Shambler, on the other hand, is going to scout his Nemesis first. Stargate. Shambler 1. Not exactly the same as SG1, but, you know. And IskatuMesk will be scouting the wrong way. Now, seeing the scribe come from this angle doesn't really tell you much, but maybe if he had a unit over there or a structure over there, he would have actually seen the angle and surmised that his opponent is indeed in the top left. That being said, when his gateway finishes, he can instantaneously, well, near instantaneously, queue a Dracodin as soon as he has enough resources. And indeed he does. So he will be able to scout with that, because his scribe is going to be woefully out of position. And assuming he wasn't anticipating any sort of cheese play, or himself planning on any cheese play, Mesk can use his scribe just to immediately task back onto the mineral line. I don't know why Shambler is going to the bottom right, but maybe he's expecting cheese and silly plays as far as early bases are concerned. So across the map, Mesk's scout goes. Yet another scribe has been trained, and nothing doing just yet, but a Panoptis has been saved up. At the same time, the Dracodin is on the way. A quick calculation tells me that the Dracodin will get here before the Panoptis is complete. This could be some tense play happening. In fact, I think, combined with the fact that Mesk's scribe is heading to the top left, there might be some really serious opportunity for worker damage. At the very least, a worker could be killed. However, the Dracodin went to the right instead of immediately up the ramp, and another Dracodin is being rallied to the mineral line. So the Warden is actually going to be the target. It being forced to cancel is not necessarily a bad move by Mesk. He's going to kite backwards and still continue to focus down the Warden itself. Well, unfortunately, he did misclick and is starting to try to do some hull damage to the Panoptis. A little bit of micro goes a long way, but unfortunately, he's only able to deal 2 damage to it. And the Warden itself was not cancelled. However, a Warden has been started for Mesk, and, as he is learning, the pylon, when placed diagonally to another structure, almost always is a complete blockage, especially for workers. So, he's going to have slightly less efficient mineral mining from that patch in particular, but it's not a huge loss. In fact, as soon as he throws a third worker per patch in his base, he should be just fine. The wounded Dracodin will return home, and joining with the other 2, as well as the 2 Wardens, it'll be a formidable defense against anything that Shambler wants to mount. In particular, even if he goes for a land effect, there's not really much he can do against the number of Dracodins that are being fielded by Mesk. He'll have a 4th one, and then he can move out, fairly certain that the Warden coverage in his base is going to be enough to at least isolate the Panoptis. It's going to charge in forward and immediately announce its presence. First shot is there, and it's inconsequential thanks to flash shielding, but what won't be inconsequential is the number of Dracodins sent to respond to it. Now, in Cosmonarchy Brood War, Dracodins move a little bit slower, but much more smoothly and less autistically than Dragoons in Starcraft 1, so that's something to remember. And another thing to remember is, of course, the fact that the Shambler has played very greedily here. he's not going to be expanding anytime soon. He can barely afford to sustain a single Panoptis' worth of production, and that's due to the fact that he's cut workers to make this thing happen. The Wounded Warden is also less than half HP. In 3 or 4 in about 5 Drakadin shots, all of the shields and some hull will be missing because of the armor of the Warden. So that's something else to remain vigilant for. And with the Drakadins moving out here, well, they will be turning back just in time to see 3 Panoptises, and lightning strikes in my background as so too do the Panoptises, but they're instantaneously thwarted. In fact, Mesk is going to go ahead and try to position himself such that he can instantaneously catch the Panoptises as they're moving around. He could have even attack moved that one to stop the flash shielding and do some more hull damage, but he does not have the reflexes. A second Stargate is on the way, and he's transitioned out of pure Panoptis into some Auroras, as well as a second Warden, anticipating some attacks. Even with 4 Panoptises, however, I don't know that Shambler can hold on. Many of these are bruised, and now they're not even in position to join with the Wardens on the defense. Both players spotting their own forces. 2 gateways training multiple Ecclesiasts, and now, oh, the air units are cornered. It's not every day you say that sentence out loud, and one of the Panoptises has already bitten the dust. A second Warden is going to be a heavy asset here for Shambler in his defense against Mesk, and it's just about to finish. Alongside, of course, the presence of yet another Warden, which will delay the 4th replacement Panoptis. The Aurora is deceptively not very durable, and of course it's not even being focused down. One more shot and that Panoptis would surely be toast, but it'll survive on 1 HP, at which point, remember, only 4 shots are going to be required to take it out. Ecclesiasts are here to keep the Drakadins relatively shields up between the shots of the Panoptis, and hey, they're even going to go ahead and spot the move out. But Shambler is totally fine pulling units away from his opponent's, his attention anyway, and that Aurora is now going to be absolutely slapped. He'll take the shot on the chin, but just yet another unit lost by the Shambler, trying to make the air toss work. Right now, it doesn't seem too significant. An engram means that he can't even realistically do too much damage. The range for this thing is pretty reasonable. At best, the air units can hope to try to defeat this gateway in particular. But even then, I think the rallies of the Drakadins and the presence of the Grand Library are definitely going to throw him off. That Aurora is almost certainly going to die thanks to the engram and the very long, surprisingly long range of the Warden, and now we're going to see an attempt at picking off some of these units. Unfortunately, he's just barely not able to get there in time. As soon as he repowers this, however, and maybe adds yet another engram, there's really not any opportunity for Shambler to do anything with his air army. He's instead going to have to remain on 1 base while giving up a lot of map control to Mesk and his ground forces. Really what he would like to have here is some way to charge forward boldly and not immediately get owned. But he does lose 2 units frequently. Had his Ecclesiast led the charge, paradoxical as that may seem, or counterintuitive as that may seem, one of the things that he could have done is use the speed boost from its corpse to jump up the ramp and immediately start attacking. But 4 Wardens, coupled with the sheer number of Panoptises that are now present, is going to make that a little bit of a difficult task. And the Panoptises are indeed in a fairly powerful state. The Lenefek trades its life for a single Drakadin. I'm not so sure that was worth it, but nonetheless, some more hull damage is being taken. Some not exactly opportune trades here, and the Ecclesiast even gives its dying breath to enchant the Drakadins with additional movement speed. It's short-lived, but something that Mesk did try to use in that context. Atriuses are now on the way from the Grand Library, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see an attempted expansion. Some good focus fire coming out of the remaining Drakadins on the field, and all of these units are indeed very, very bruised. Even just stutter-stepping the attack moves here add a little bit additional hull damage. I don't know that he's got the minerals to continue this, but he is going to go into Legionnaires. If Atriuses were not in play, I would argue that Shambler could transition into an upper hand, but honestly, looking at this state of affairs with a mass Drakadin, mass Atrius support, well, mass, it's only 2 right now, it does feel to me like Mesk will continue to maintain control. 4 Panoptises is what Shambler is down to, training Auroras on the backline, not exactly what he really wants to do. Admittedly, leading with the high HP Scout is not necessarily the worst choice, but at this stage he's revealed Yes, indeed, my opponent does have Atriuses, but still choosing to commit to the Legionnaires. They will sustain quite a bit of splash damage, but so long as they can collapse upon the Atriuses, which are currently clumped up quite close to the Dracodins themselves, you might be able to see Shambler pull a surprising victory. Any hopes of him trying to expand in as soon order is quickly dashed with that engram purchase, and the air units are now going to move their way somewhere else. 2 Wardens, as well as a host of Dracodins, are ready to accept these air units. Panoptises, as well as 2 Auroras, are in this area, generally speaking. One of the Dracodins will soon be sniped, but that's pretty much all that he can get without worrying himself with the oncoming onslaught of the Striders on the ramp. I think all of those Legionnaires were just spotted by Mesk, and now he could get sandwiched. He's going to be going for a relatively secret base, it looks like, or at the very least, he's just using that scribe to scout. Now the Legionnaires do come down from the ramp, and the Atriuses must be protected at all costs for this engagement. One of the Legionnaires has already fallen, but there's many more where that came from, and you can see how quickly they dive upon the Atrius, instantaneously isolating it. Even still, the kill threat mostly comes from the Panoptises, which have been grievously injured in this battle and all of the battles that led up to it. That Strider will not buy too much time and is in fact leading the rest of Shambler's forces to the low ground. But at the same time, there will soon be 4 Wardens in this position. And there's ample defenses for the main, so it's not like the air units can really do anything by themselves. Some Zealots will buy some time, and some Dracodins will take some pot shots at the same time. In fact, they'll even claim the life. Oh no, not quite. They were retargeted on something else, so they didn't end up claiming the life of a low HP Panoptis. The Wardens are nearly complete, and an engram is in the back line, so this attack is almost certainly not going to break Mesk. That being said, he is struggling with the Legionnaires, and engram still manages to deliver a crushing blow to a number of those Legionnaires. And another pylon there for redundancy as the engram on the low ground is continuing to channel its energy. A Zealot will take some shots on the way out. The Panoptis is not quite out of harm's way just yet, and the engram mostly finished. Unlikely for very much more to go the way of the Shambler in this engagement. His units on hold position, and the Storm to deal a little bit of damage on the way out. Storm is not too bad whatsoever, but Hallucination is a little bit better against higher HP targets because the longer you sustain them with shots, or the longer you hit them with shots, the more double damage you offer up. And indeed, a Nexus will be taken in the top right, so as Shambler is finally taking his own expansion and strip mining his own base, we are in fact seeing Mesk do the same in the top right after already establishing a natural of his own. He will be going ahead and popping this gateway that is blocking the bulk of his ramp as he continues to produce Atriuses and scale away from gateway units. It does hurt to kill your structures as Protoss, but at the same time, this base is not exactly known for being massive. A second engram on the low ground means Mesk is certainly meaning business in this context. What he can do is add a Crucible somewhere to boost the efficiency of these defensive structures, but it might not be necessary, as a horde of Legionnaires is now going to try to descend upon the engram, which will then, in short order, be focused down. A great Psionic Storm from the Cantavis on the ramp does allow lots of damage onto those Legionnaires, and though a lot of workers are dying, remember, at this stage, we are going to see a lot more workers, a lot more of an economic advantage from Mesk, who has this hidden base up here. At the same time, a Scribe over here is going to confirm that position, but will it be enough? Will there be enough defenses there to throw off any would-be attacks from something like additional Panoptises, or indeed some Legionnaires? Workers are being transferred to the natural now, but Mesk has a narrow advantage in that context. Indeed, the dead Scribe does confirm that this base was scouted, and I think a single Warden is not nearly going to be enough to hold that base versus the admittedly wounded Panoptises and Aurora that are there. A redundancy pylon does help, but this engram is long from being completed. So I feel like there would have to be a pretty significant distraction to make Shambler fail in his mission to defeat this base. Or he could take his sweet time trying to do his best to destabilize the Nexus specifically. Almost certainly it will be just fine in this context, and the Legionnaire is scouting the bottom right to put Shambler's mind at ease in this Protoss versus Protoss match. There is an outside chance that the engram doesn't finish quite in time, and even if that is indeed the case, I do feel like this base can just be rebuilt in short order. The defenses are the most expensive part of it, and I do think that Shambler is going to start losing a couple of additional units if he sticks around. There's enough money to instantly rebuild the Nexus, and at this stage, the engram can protect it from further intrusions of the similar variety. A land effect wouldn't be too bad, but I do feel like the defenses are too spread out at this point that it's unlikely that you'd be able to see too much more, especially once that warden completes. And that one, too. Back at home, IskatuMesk is content to remain on a single gateway and a single grand library. He has added an embassy, but I do not see any witnesses just yet. He did confirm that the composition has not changed from the Shambler, but at this stage, you have to imagine that maybe Mesk will be just fine in this situation from a holdout perspective. Another attack is going to be attempted by the Legionnaires, but additional Cantavises have been trained, or at least one of them is just nearly about to pop. And in Cosmonarchy Brood War, your specialists instantly start out with full energy when they are trained. Mostly because of the fact that we have the flash energy regeneration in the same way that we have flash shielding. That Cantavis is more than ready to make this work. An Ardent Authority in the background, it looks like maybe what we're going to be seeing, especially if we see a Strident Stratum somewhere, is the presence of, I'm guessing analogs combined with Clarions. And the fact that he's capping a Geyser, at least one of them, does more or less seal that deal for me. Hey, geysers don't have a portrait. What the hell? Well, what does Mesk want to do? He's adding yet another engram, really trying to fortify his positions. And at this stage, a third base is on the way by the Shambler, but again, with a witness to spot that, it might not be around for very long. The second engram will not complete before the Legionnaires get there, but they turn back around, so that gives the opportunity for this to get even more fortified. Now, I wouldn't be surprised for Mesk to take the natural here as well, and then start pillaring this area with a bunch of defense, really fortify it quite heavily. In the background, the Shambler has concluded that he needs to breach the defenses using siege weaponry, and out comes the Optecton, a very long-range unit. It's clearly just currently a reskin of the Atreus, but with 11 range on its primary gun, and a secondary weapon that fires towards air units. Crucible will, of course, enchant the defenses over here, but there is only a single engram, and it's actually out of range of the Crucible. And of course, again, the Optectons are known as breakers of any sort of siege. A positron has been created. That's reasonable splash control for the Legionnaires, and indeed for the air units as well. If he can get his Zealots on top of the Optectons, there could be a chance for Mesk to clutch this one out. But his Panoptis, or rather his Positron, dies without even firing a single shot. And now at this stage, it doesn't look too hot for him. A witness patrolling for other witnesses is something we see often in Protoss vs. Protoss. The Optectons are focus firing the Atreises, and a bunch of scribes have been pulled and out of confusion. A fairly good psionic storm for zoning out the enemy forces does allow for quite a few opportunities for his allies there. But unfortunately for Mesk, he's not quite able to do too much. And in fact, he's a little bit scared of getting slapped by the Panoptises providing vision. Meanwhile, at this base, it's only barely been set up, and there's not really that many workers lying around here. But the extra space does allow him to potentially go for, apparently, mass embassies for, I suppose, a lot of scribes? I'm not quite sure what he's doing there. The Crucible is now under attack. The best he can do is Psionic Storm and then follow it up with a hallucination for now. He doesn't really have the range to deal with the Optectons, though he could drop an engram, and it would have even range with the Optectons given the cliff advantage. Perhaps he doesn't quite know that particular breakpoint. The Positrons are now in a position to try and launch our projectiles at them. They themselves have enough range to get at least up until 9, so if they're not at about maximum range, they won't necessarily do the trick. Panoptises trade their lives, or at least one of their lives, and now the Optectons are guarding versus this exact force. You can see right then and there, the Optectons are able to actually abuse this exact position to snipe at various scribes. I'm not sure that Mesk has noticed yet, because he's too busy building a lot of embassies, for some reason. What is Shambler doing in the background? Saturating his third, okay. guarding a bunch of other bases and going for a 4th in the middle. The Tectons move forward and deny mining from the ridge. The Crucible is still under attack. It's a fairly expensive structure, but in this particular case, the Tectons simply don't have the range to avoid getting tickled by something like the Positron. The Atreus can also do the same thing, but additional Tectons have arrived at the front gates. And at this stage, I think maybe hope is fleeting for Mesk, who has not been able to pocket any tech of any sort. He is getting an analog, but it's going to be a little bit behind in the queue. And back here, I feel like maybe he just built the wrong structure or something. Losing his natural as we speak, he's going to go for lattices. I guess he intends to swarm him with vassals as a final move or something. Tectons can fire their secondary weapon at multiple targets at once, similar to the Matrix. So vassals, ironically, are probably one of the only air units the Protoss can field that won't do much damage to Tectons specifically. A 5th one is on the way. Perhaps a 6th somewhere as well, lost in translation. Yes, indeed, at the natural. But at this stage, I think the Tectons alone are going to close the game. There stood a chance for Mesk to deal with the Tectons before they grew in too much number, but he didn't really have anything to dive upon them, and their weakness is still air units despite the multi-target. The Nexus fails. The lattices have been created. Admittedly, I do think that's what these embassies were supposed to be. But he's lost his natural. He's lost many workers in his main, and he is now down at an almost 4-to-1 ratio, yeah, or 3-to-1 ratio in terms of workers. Well, he's going to go ahead and showcase the analog at the very least, it looks like. See it bouncing the projectiles back at him. Unfortunately for Mesk, it's simply not going to be enough. The GG is called. Shambler goes up another game. Again, this is exactly what happened in the previous set, albeit that second game was a bit longer than what we saw out of the DF set. In the last set, as Mesk selects Repulsion for our next map, Mesk randomed into Terran, then Protoss, and then Zerg. And when he randomed into Zerg, that was when he began the comeback, I believe. Or maybe it was the inverse, where it was Terran, then Zerg, and then Protoss. And the Protoss match on Nitro Valley is when he began his comeback. I think that could have been the case. The mental game is hard for Mesk, but don't worry. I believe he can show off what he's got now that we're into Game 3. It's all on the line, and this is where he fixed his stage fright issues. This is where he rolls Zerg. Zerg here! Shambler will be going for a Cenotaph opening yet again if his gas harvesting is anything to go by. And at this stage, we are indeed going to be in a pretty good position. See Mesk at perhaps his best. He defeated Darkened Fantasies in a straight-up macro game, or standard game anyway, using Quasrock first to apply pressure in the early game. Could it catch the Shambler off guard? Well, we see zero gas harvested, and this is exactly what Mesk did to get us all the way to Game 5, if you remember. So I am looking forward to seeing this one in action. Off it goes. A 45-second timing on the Quasrock pool itself. Before the pylon even had a twinkle in its eye, the Shambler will begin the scout. Start to station his units, his waypoints, get his ducks in a row. But I don't know if he's going to arrive before the Quasrock pool has hatched. And now some gas is being harvested with a single worker. with intention of going into a Larvosk and following up with a decent amount of power. At the same time, a rogue gallery is going to be the one of choice, so it's not going to be Cenotaphs. Shambler may regret going for a bit of a meme opener, but at the same time, Mesk is going to arrive with his Droleth quite late to the party to discover such a structure. Well, as soon as his Quasrock hatches, he has the opportunity to go for a Kagrant into a Larvosk. His next two larvae likely to be Zethrakors. Indeed they are in the rogue gallery. Nearing 80% completion, the scribe will arrive. Just in time to see Zethrakors pounce upon it. Oh, he's actually going to hide it, it looks like, but instead, of course, he'll be tickling the scribe for a while. Shambler can't believe his eyes. A Zerg player going Zeth? Going Quasrock? In this economy? Why, yes. And it will be a bar guest first, but I do believe that Mesk will spot this, and can indeed drop a Kagrant into a Spraith before the bar guest can get too far. That being said, the bar guest can also be used defensively. There is a Matrix, followed by a redundancy pylon on the way, and the Droleth will spot the rogue gallery spinning. It will either be, of course, the bar guest opener or the Kabbalist. The bar guest resoundingly arrives and starts to tickle the Droleth. How long until we see a Kagrant being morphed? Well, it's not long at all. And again, the Zethrakors can simply burrow to avoid pain. And off they go. What are you going to do with your bar guest, Shambler? Off he goes. Once again, unburrowing to see what's up. The Matrix is out, so these have limited efficacy, but I think they might be able to catch a single scribe due to that range on that Matrix. Indeed, they will. Just tickling. Just offering a little bit of distraction. And they're going to go ahead and burrow all the same. The old Quasilisk, a last gasp of hope of some obscure author of Final Odyssey, which is where I took this graphic from. Solstice has replaced you, but you're still the Quasilisk in our hearts. And here comes the bar guest to announce its presence, to tickle the ticklers. And off it goes, instantaneously destroyed. At the same time, you can see the multi-target in action here. That Zethrakor will go ahead and unburrow just to confirm the scouting. More spinning is occurring. A Spraith was maybe not sighted by that bar guest, so these Quasilisks could go across the map and start to tickle their opponents, but at the same time, Mesk may want to just go into an expansion, sensing that his opponent is doing something a little bit unconventional. The Zethrakor is guarding the ramp, so he'll be able to scout out any not cloaked ground units, which obviously only exist in the context of the Vagrant. Though I suppose a Kabbalist on... what would you say there? A Kabbalist on attack move might actually see that Zethrakor, so it could happen. But we'll see. Double bar guest looking around, seeing what they can do. It's not going to be much, and the Ovaleth has begun its patrol route as well, so that's really going to hamper the opportunity here. A single Droleth is being tickled, but the Quasis are here. They position themselves such that they can instantaneously attack these poor bar guests before they can really do too much, and now the Droleth burrows. A whole host of Quasilisks are now in production, and the Ovaleth, forgotten behind the mineral line, is in a position to potentially help. However, it seems to not be needed. The bar guest is too slow now to avoid getting absolutely owned, and actually has to have some micro associated with it between shots, otherwise you will just get annihilated. The Automaton Register is here undoubtedly to provide idols, but these more expensive war machines cost a bit more gas than maybe Shambler is used to, and as a result, it'll take a while, considering his bar guest expenditures, before he can afford an idol. There it is. 75 gas down the drain to counter an offensive that isn't truly coming. The bar guests are going to try to keep track of their opponent, but they're mostly just sort of patrolling around the map right now. If they do get to a critical mass, they can defeat a large number of Quasilisks before they can really get retaliated upon. But the presence of the Ovaleth makes that a lot harder because you can no longer take the engagements on your terms, and your fragile and slow units are not really capable of doing much else. An idol and a bar guest hold the fort down at home. A Zethrakor that was once burrowed somewhere obscure ends up getting absolutely tickled on a scout. The Nexus, it has gone down. A bar guest, it has been shot down. Another one at half HP. The Hatcherosk is nearly complete, and 3 workers were on their way to help saturate it, but it looks like they thought better of themselves. A Circuith over here to cover for any shenanigans related to Kabbalists, it looks like. And the 3 bar guests are on their way back home as a Vagrant and another Idol are in production. A Lattice, also in production, and it somehow, some way, there was a cancel on the Nexus. I really wonder what could have prompted that. Perhaps he saw the Quasilisk move out and feared for his life. He cannot allow his base to be tickled to death. Or perhaps he just decided to all in on a 1 base. But it's Zerg. And it's Mesk's Zerg. It's not just any Zerg. It's Zerg here. You don't know what you're up against. You don't know how effective Mesk can be. But as soon as he sees the idols, he'll most likely fall back. Instead, tactical lag will take over. And he won't even notice that there are Vargas there. So he will lose 3 Quasilisks. But admittedly, I thought it was going to be much worse. The Avaleth is here and could elevate her up into this position where they can avoid the Matrix and its woes. However, instead, they are just going to go home. Oh. Look at that Spraith. Look at that Hydrockton. Look at that Circuith. And look at that Macro Hatch. Once again, we are in a spot where we are going to see Mesk on the 2 base Macro Hatch Bonanza. Now he'll catch the units over here and start to thin the herd, particularly on the bar guests. It is quite effective. Unfortunately for Mesk, he's only really able to get that one, and he does scarp her off with his Avaleth, so maybe he can catch this on the way. Particularly splitting the forces, he could have taken the high ground and does indeed do that. And at this stage, the bar guests are now just getting absolutely dunked on. So off goes the air control, and he could even, if he's really smart, try to focus down the Vagrant in particular, but instead he's going to buy time, await the ability to create additional circuits to prevent the Protoss army from doing much of anything. And you know what? You allow my Quasilisks to leave, or to live rather, then instead I'm just going to occupy your space. You try to attack move me, they'll slow down reinforcements. Iziricors and Zethrakors have already started to make their way over here. And Kagrants are complete, followed shortly, I'm sure, by a series of circuits. The Iziricors are currently shrugging off the idle attacks, and the Circuith is going to pin them to a wall if they're not careful. Zethrakors are trying to surround. It seems to be working so far. The Vagrant, dangerously low, and should be focused down after it gets converted. Not able to get pretty much any kills whatsoever, so just a little bit of damage. Not too bad, not too shabby. The 3 Quasilisks are going to try to body block or perhaps otherwise interrupt these idols. They will indeed start to tickle them to death, but not in a position to actually body block, and the idols are very fast. A whole host of them has been made back at home, and manifolds are on the way from the Lattice to pack a deceptive amount of punch. The Zethrakors are not long for this world, given that reinforcement, so a couple of them do go down. In fact, a trio. That's 3. Vorvikors were not with the fight, but they can certainly be put to good use in a moment. The Protoss army is a bit of ramshackle at the moment, but could potentially do okay if they attack the Vorvikors before the rest of the units can engage. However, neither player really looking at the middle of the map right now, and Mesk is going to start to assemble an attack force. Instantaneously losing 1 Vorvikor is not exactly how he wanted to start this one off, but he will indeed go for the trigger, at least on some of those units. Needs to get the rest of them in the battle as the Iziricors and Quasilisks join the fray from the right. Instead, there's suddenly Zethrakors down below. How did those units get there, Shambler wonders. He wonders to himself as a series of unfortunate events unfolds before our eyes. His idols picked apart like flies. His vagrants turn to shades. His manifolds, they've got AIDS. All right, well, not quite, but I needed a rhyme. Well, the Protoss army stands conquered, and some defenses are on the way, but still twinkles in their mother's eye, so to speak. A series of unfortunate events indeed. More Zethrakors on the way. A 2-base macro play, you say? I'm straight. Now a 3rd base on the way for none other than IskatuMesk, taking control of the game up by 6 workers. The Warden will finish, but not the Engram. Almost certainly not, anyway. Now the idols are here to try to riposte this attack. Unfortunately for Mesk, the rest of his army was not immediately visible, so I'm not so sure that he's going to be able to crack this position. But the Engram has a slow attack windup, so maybe, just maybe, he can benefit from some Vorvikors and use the Hydras to get a stick on them. At this stage, Shambler is paranoid. Was there an air switch? Are there transports? What should I expect? An Iris has long since been produced by IskatuMesk, and his third base is well on its way as well. At this stage, we have to wonder, is Mesk even going to bother trying to crack this with Tier 1, or is he simply going to bide his time? An Ardent Authority on the way, perhaps Servitors could help ease Shambler's plight, certainly would reinforce his feet, considering they are shoes. But beyond that, what else can he imagine? A Hydrock Den? So soon? Quite possible. Bactylisks could very soon grace our screens. A vassal to scout and confirm the presence of a third base being set up. Nascent though it may be, it's a sign of our times, and Zerg are here. That Ovaleth returns, having long since unloaded the Quasilisk that it had abducted. Perhaps that's that one there in the middle of the map. And a large number of Droleths are standing idle, waiting for orders. A single vassal, tickling workers to death. Should be able to get a second kill. Oh, not quite, because Shambler wasn't paying attention to it. Instead, the vassal will die. And more workers shall mine. Vorvikors? No. Bactylisks? Yes. Vorvikors might still be a good option here, but at this stage, there's really nothing holding back the onslaught, the potential onslaught of Zerg here. Now, it is only 5 Bactylisks, so that has to be said. This vassal will be sighted by the Ovaleth and actually even be tickled by it, but that's pretty much all that he's got. Oh, never mind, it's just going to be sighted. I don't think either player noticed the drop, or the dot, rather. The Ovaleth will indeed spot out this force, and be tickled for its troubles. The Bactylisks will take this opportunity to get into a good position to start shooting. At this stage, the Vagrants and the Idols, they only have 6 range. Positron, on the other hand, can use cliff advantage for that. The Irileth morph, I do like it. It allows you to take whole Kagrant, Cesiants, and etc. after they've already been mutated into actual defenses and move them around. But even beyond that, it provides detection at a larger radius, and the Irileth is slightly beefier, along with being more mobile. Well, he confirms that there are indeed no forces on the high ground anymore. Does he want to use that to his advantage? Bactylisks are going to immediately start peppering down the Vagrants. At least one of them should fall on the fallback, but instead it's going to be an idol. The engram sounds off. Is that going to be enough to dissuade Mesk from attacking? Instead, Shambler's desperately moving to the high ground, but all of this time, he's left his defenses for dead. They're all falling, and now Mesk is given enough space to start moving down to the low ground. The engram is staying alive, standing tall. The Bactylisks can try to focus it and force it down, and indeed they will. But this attack is unlikely to be fatal at this stage, and the Irileth is starting to get tickled. At the same stage, these Bactylisks are going to be good enough to put a slight dent into these forces, and some of them will even try to escape. The Irileth does end up living to tell the tale, and 2 Bactylisks and a Hydralisk will safeguard this base in the bottom right. And that's not too shabby. One of these Vagrants is already a shade, and so it shall soon fall. Not here. Going to be long for this world. Zethrakors, Izirikors. All manner of Tier 1 Zerg units are on the way, but no Tier 2 structure anywhere. And while the Vagrant Shade does expire, just as the Zethrakors start to retire, the rest of the forces in the middle of the map. And unfortunately for Mesk, the selection extender is not yet implemented. A third base in the cards for the Shambler, but he's far behind the presence of the third for IskatuMesk. The way that he closed out the game versus DF on this very map, with this very pattern of play, was indeed going for Calculisks. His Leral Pond just now started. This Droleth, suspiciously placed. Perhaps it will be a tech center soon. At the same time, Shambler trying to stretch his legs and attack in. The Positrons offering adequate splash damage alongside the single idol that is left attacked. The Izirikors could certainly collapse on this army, but the Zethrakors on this side might be the key to Shambler's demise. At the very least, Mesk will want to hold the ramp. He sees that the attack is continuing, and he allows his units to charge in forward for a moment, just to bruise some of these units before falling back. There are no ground defenses, no anti-surface cells whatsoever, but Hydras and Zethrakors are on the way, and Nathrakors can even wrap around for a desperate flank if they need to. But the micro has to be precise, for the Positrons and the Idol do a significant amount of splash damage. And now, at this stage, the Positron is able to melt a lot of the Nathrakors. A steep gas investment, but only a few Droleths killed, and the rest of the Zethrakors wrapped all the way around to mop up the rest of that force. The Shambler cannot hope to remax his army nearly as fast as his opponent. Albeit there is an engram there to cover potential Calculisk attacks, if it's only by itself, surely it wouldn't be enough. This Droleth's still not yet turned into anything of note, and additional units are indeed mutating Bactylisks all over the map. Nothing gets sighted for the bottom right here for Shambler. Zethracore will be greeted by a vassal. Calculisks will announce their presence, it seems. Not interested in hiding them, per se. Shambler could take a look at that at any moment. A Matraval Nest. Convalisks, perhaps the choice. Vilgoricores are also quite adequate, but also very slow and fat. The Calculisks sharing space with the vassal will instantaneously get owned. I'm not so sure that the vision updated in time for the Calculisks to remain undetected, but it might force a number of, well, I think we know the answer to that question before I even pose it. At the same time, this third base is going to be destroyed before it even has a chance to be saturated. The Zethracours, combined with the Iziricores, making short work of the shields, and following that, the hull of that Nexus. No defenses there, and the strip mining is complete, but the Calculisks did die a disgusting death. Capping the geysers is IskatuMesk, at the very least in his main and his natural. His third, not so much, and he's taking a fifth, as this fourth is really where his sun doesn't shine yet. Containing his opponent is not a bad strategy. We all know the Shambler can occasionally fall to lethargy. The longer the game goes on, perhaps the more Mesk feels in his prime. He's competing for honor, for glory, and for like $5. So that's pretty important for him. That's $5 American. The Bactylisks using the high ground to absolutely eviscerate the Simulacra, Manifolds, and indeed the Servitors. Well, a couple of them do split, but it's mostly just a nuisance because now there's more units for him to select. Shambler is not too happy about this position. He hasn't found himself in this position very often. He has a couple of vassals strewn about the map for vision, but other than that, it's just nothing. Distance mining, not really a problem here for Mesk, as his Hatrosk is nearly complete for his fifth base, which is, funnily enough, more saturated than his fourth base, but it's because it's so far away. Trying to split the map, he'll take additional bases, I think. At the very least, he'll guard them. Quasilisks all over the map. How I wish they were Solstice's latest work. Don't worry, Ascension 4 is coming. Zethracore will poke on in here and see what it can find. The answer is not really much, but it confirms that the forces are not yet evacuated. A Strident Stratum as well as an embassy here, so it looks like maybe there will be analog Clarion synergies occurring, or perhaps some kind of strange drop using embassies for envoy production. Whatever that was, it died. I guess it was probably a vassal. I don't see any other air unit that it might have been. Even that vassal manages to stay alive. There's nothing over here guarding this, so a whole host of Droleths, however. Additional macro hatches being deployed, and indeed, Tier 3 is on the way for IskatuMesk. He's been allowed to get not one, not two, but 3 bases over his opponent. And this vassal is not long for this world either, so only a couple of dead Droleths to speak of. Maybe even one, as far as I can see currently. A lot of them mutated into Kagrins, perhaps. An attempted move out by the Shambler, but it's going to cost him. In fact, Mesk will bleed him quite heavily here with the Bactylis positioning. The Iziricores rushing to the ramp to try to safeguard that. The Zethracours aren't going to be long for this world with all the splash damage ambiently appearing, but it's still not going to be enough for Shambler to be able to break out of his own base. And even then, a significant number of those positrons ended up getting additionally bruised, and one even fell to the ambient bounces. Okay, there's an envoy here, but is it really going to be enough? Mutalisks coming from the skyline. That's a reference that I think only I know now, actually. So it's very... That was it. I got the joke, so I guess that's good. A 6th base, a 7th base here for IskatuMesk. A whole host of Droleths, and Shambler seems to be waving the white flag without actually saying GG. Could IskatuMesk get to the point where he gets on the board versus the Shambler, the champion of Ascension 2? We could be staring at the beginning of a new era, boys. The Artisan does indeed make its presence known by warping in a pylon. Shambler desperate to get another base. Still no analogs, but at least he'll have a Clarion. Might mitigate some of the damage dealt by the Bactalisk bounces. The Mutalisks do exist, which means there's a Muthrock Spire somewhere that I haven't spotted. And it is indeed getting into the Fifth Wrath Haunt. So although there will be a third base here for the Shambler, I'm not sure that it's going to be enough. We are going to see either Cascathalors or Gazithalors, and either one of them will make short work of the Engrams, but Gazithalors, I believe, only have 9 range at this stage, so they have even range with Engrams, and thus need a little bit of extra engage. Cascathalors, on the other hand, are around 14 range, and thus the same as sieged phalanxes. As a reference. Capping his geysers, ignoring that ridge, all is right with the world. Some Spraith colonies over here for errant vassals. And Skithercore or 2 will reveal this position. A cheeky base has been deployed. 8 servitors are loaded into that envoy. There are still some circuits here, and, well, Tozgralisks have made their appearance. If these were Scortriths, I'd feel more confident about Mesk holding this position without revealing his hand, but they are not, in fact, Scortriths. The Vithrilisk is chasing down the envoy. I suppose that's something, and the Quasilisks are here to get tickled, I guess. It's a tickle fight, really. And there comes some mutas to deal with that. The Tozgralisks do reveal themselves. And a couple of Droleths died, but that's pretty much about it. 3 mutas as well. Servitors proving themselves quite effective. But soon it will be all for naught. The Tozgralisks are out. And at this stage, the Shambler accepts defeat without saying GG, because he wants me to have to cast even longer in one day. What a nice guy. In fact, the police are coming to arrest the Shambler. Did you know that? Well, thankfully I was able to hide that. The Engrams are out, so it's a little bit awkward for a whole clump of air units to deal with them. Gazithalors are out as well, but again, same range. Plenty of Tozgralisks. You can just bait out the Engram shots and then see what else you can do, but yeah, at this stage I think maybe Cascathalors are going to be the answer. He could also go for Alcagalisks, which are much more durable and do indeed outrange the enemy forces. Absolutely brutal. The Engrams are now being tickled. A whole chunky shot has gone onto them, reverting them back into the Mutalisk state. Here come the Gazithalors. How surprised Mesk will be when Engrams equal their range. They still deal massive damage at this maximum range, though. Something to keep in mind. At the very least, he should be able to kill the Nexus from here, which is already going to frustrate the Shambler. An Engram on the low ground, or rather on the high ground, will be able to attack this Hacharosk as well. So that's basically BM, but, you know. Checking on the eggs, we do see the Cascathalor. I would love to see an updated version of the Cascathalor, because currently it's quite dumb. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know how to deal with them? Just shoot him. Shoot him with this. Shoot him with this ugly fucking thing. Meanwhile, the front gate is being burst open. Not really a whole lot going on there, but Tozgralisks will clean it up just nicely. More Gazithalors are also en route, and yeah, there's no third base anymore. Depleted minerals in both his main and natural. Clearly not capable of winning the game, but he'll struggle on. The Tozgralisks are somewhat vulnerable to things like Positron's splash damage, but the Clarions get absolutely eaten by them anyway. And some of the Positrons were over here anyway, so even less of the damage was sustained. Cascathalors are very slowly lumbering across the battlefield. You have every base. Just a move. I'm tempted to type just GG, but that would interfere with the game, and I shouldn't do that. Shambler is just notoriously easy to get tilted. If Mesk can continue to shrug him off there, and just tickle him to death with slowly making him more tilted, he might stand a higher chance in the next game, actually. And you know what? If Shambler wants to waste everybody's time, just remember this. Remember this when you get reverse swept by a Canadian. Oh. Zorka's Shroud going up. The hotfix to the Zarkavor Core is in. So when this finishes and turns into an Ultrac Cavern, that's going to give him a pretty good opposition here, right? Suddenly, Mesk will be that much more effective. Cascathalors continue their lumbering march. As long as the Ovaleth or something else spots for the Cascathalors, this engram won't actually be able to do anything versus them. Oh, the analog is out, so it did end up retaliating a little bit there. With the Clarion, he might be able to do something silly there. It's quite powerful. The stacked fields also don't quite help things. But the engrams have been cracked, so there's really nothing to this bottom half of the base anymore. Iziricors are on their way, but there's no selection extender here. Ah, Vilgoricors. The larvae are being shot to death. The Gazithalors are attacking. Only now does Shambler think to use Clarions alongside analogs. That's a little silly, don't you think? Here come the Drolleths! Say GG. To be completely honest, I agree. We even get a hash on the way out. Maybe that's useful for debugging later. Well, maybe something good did come from Shambler being an idiot. But GG is called, and Mesk is on the board! I imagine Equilibrium will be selected by the Shambler, but we will await his decision. Where is Shambler? He must have gone BRB so that he can take out his tilt on his keyboard. But somewhere other than our chats. He can't believe it. He can't believe he lost to IskatuMesk. Honestly, that match was pretty cool. The fact that we got to see the whole Zerg tech tree pretty much was neat. Equilibrium is going to go ahead and be selected by the Shambler. Water has also been requested. Here in Cosmonarchy Brood War tournaments, like Ascension number 3, Here at the No Frauds Club, we care for our players. Therefore, we provide all of the amenities, all of the amenities. Me too, Alexander. That is actually true. Well, I think when skills start to stabilize, and maybe the maps get a little bit safer, so that the openings get a little bit less volatile, and as we continue to evolve the game and so on, I do think that we're going to see more games go the distance where you do see Tier 3 unlocked for Zerg, and therefore the chances of the Estratholeth actually showing up are going to increase. But, you know, I've been thinking about a bunch of different things as it pertains to that, and I feel like we probably need to see some significant overhauls, I guess you could say, to specific branches of the tech trees, I guess. So keep your eyes out on for that. And I think considering we're going to take a week off of Ascension, maybe 2 weeks, depending on progress on other things, like we'll see where we're at before we go for Ascension number 4. We will be able to say to start working on some of those larger scale revisions, because there will be more time to actually test them. We first need the time to do them, and then we need time to test them, of course. So I do feel like we're a ways off of the early game pacing that I would really like, which is where you can't really have build order losses so long as you scout within the first, I guess, I don't know exactly when a good general amount of time would be, but I imagine if we push back the first military unit timing slightly, it should allow you to get some better situations going where even proxies are a little bit less volatile, but specifically I'm just thinking of when you both build stuff in your main and yet one of you ends up getting very, very messed up to that. At the same time, I would really hate to balance the game to a point where it's a little, like, very, very overwhelmingly casual friendly just because of our skill levels are not very high. That could be something that happens. So I'm also a little bit, you know, hesitant to do that. The maps themselves need to be a little bit safer as a whole, I think, and then we can talk about what to do with the actual situation. Shambler is hungry to face IskatuMesk's Zerg here on Equilibrium. See if it happens. But Mesk is random. And Mesk is Terran. Okay, on Equilibrium, Terran is in an interesting position. But I've mostly seen Terran versus Terran or Terran versus Zerg on this map. So, with Mesk being Terran, what is he going to do? He's tried the Fulcrum First strategies, and those didn't quite work out. He is starting to get some gas, so we may end up seeing him do that yet again. I think the early Vultures definitely had an opportunity to work, but with Shambler going for no gas mining whatsoever in the early game, I suspect he's either going Fast Lattice or Fast Gateway as his opener. It looks like there's going to be a Stockade opener, presumably followed by a Quarry. But, you know, Mesk does like to wing a lot of his strategies, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's very ad hoc. And indeed, Shambler will be playing Standard. Is this him playing Scared? First, he opened with a Stargate. Well, actually, he opened with Cenotaph. Then he opened with a Stargate, and then he opened with a Rogue Gallery. Now he's going to go Gateway. Will he be scared? Will he be the Protoss that builds Drakodons? Old, reliable. A 1 in 3 chance for a mirror matchup. A 1 in 3 chance for Mesk to have his greatest race. And a 1 in 3 chance for Mesk to get fucked. That's what the narrative tells you is happening here. But is it really? Double Gateway will be scouted. And it's versus Bio Terran. Is in an interesting position at this state, because you can use anchors to ward off early Drakodons. A shame, he says. Will the BM get to Mesk? Will he allow himself to be beaten down by the Shambler's smack talk? Ooh, he's really laying it on thick after getting absolutely mega tilted in that last game. He might not have actually been mega tilted. Maybe that's just him thinking he's funny. He was either tilted or he was cringe, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't really mind the difference. A lot of damage was dealt to this gateway by this idle Mason, and only now has it been tasked on to this pylon. It could have at least gotten some hull damage done or pulled a scribe or something, but didn't end up happening, so now it's tickled to death. The double Stargate, along with a redundancy pylon, scouted out by this Mason. An anchor, pulling the Draken all the way back to the back of the base means that it does buy a little bit of time, so there is some sense to it, and the double Cyprian in the anchor strat is going to be just fine as the first Draken starts to path around to Mesk's side of the base. And now that his quarry is complete, he will start to relentlessly pump out workers, as Terrans are wont to do, followed by, I'm sure, a treasury for his natural expansion timing. And then we'll see what he wants to do. Shambler is not getting any additional tech, so it's going to just be Drakidons for the time being. And this anchor positioning is such that I really don't think Shambler can get too much done. A very familiar strategy, or sight and sounds here, is Drakidons getting absolutely chunked by anchors. He'll probably need another one before he's ready to expand, but right now he's just getting a stockade, so Mesk, feeling a little brave, is going to go ahead and tickle this Drakidon. He should just stand and fight here to get some more damage dealt, and indeed he does. Remember that in CMBW, you can simply repair units like the Maverick and the Cyprian, despite the fact that they are organic, in theory. More Mavericks are on the way. Maybe he seeks to stim them down and run them down, with the Cyprians taking shots from behind. A Nexus over here to try to keep tempo, so Shambler is playing this very much by the book. And indeed we will be seeing some repairs happen. A second anchor on the way. It will house one of these Cyprians for sure. And maybe we'll be seeing some more afterwards. But he's now starting to take the lead in terms of workers. The first anchor has lifted off to get a little bit closer to the edge. He's well insulated from any kind of power play here. And Shambler is guarding his main from drops because he's not really able to get into the get a good look at what's going on inside Mesk's base. But we see that there is no such foul play planned. And a treasury has been started with the intent to lift off and land over here. I would personally put this anchor all the way back in this direction, because now you're within attack range of the Drakidons, and it does feel like maybe that's going to be a touch too much. Nonetheless, the Mavericks are going to try to run down the Drakidons, and they will be quite successful, although some tactical lag makes it a little bit silly. And ergo, Canada. Yeah, they both had the same idea. Although it's lasting a little bit longer than I would like. Again, we are already on extra high latency, so this is just Canada. Oh, never mind. I was gonna call for a pause until it subsided, but it seems like it's already gone. Reasonable scribe split here, but Mesk won't be behind for too much longer, I don't think. The Mason was tasked with repairing stuff, but he can't get at that guy. How do I move? How do I get at that guy? Ahmed's in my way. Well, now it looks like there will be a watchdog of sorts. Treasury is nearly complete. The geyser will start to be mined from, and the liftoffs have occurred. A star pad, an anchor in the back. Mesk is feeling somewhat effective here. Somewhat safe, perhaps. He has not repaired the 90 or so HP missing from this anchor, the 84 HP missing, so that could come back to bite him, but he does have a very large number of Mavericks and an Ahmed leading the charge. Kind of reminds me of the initial unit positioning on the Hammer Falls, the last mission of Rebel Yell in the original Terran campaign. And a fire bat there. So it's somewhat nostalgic for me to see something that silly. A sequestered icon. There will be an Acantor drop in this game. But the anchor positioning tells me that Mesk is going to be okay versus that, and he is getting a Wraith. If he can scout it in time, he can add more Wraiths to the pile, but he doesn't have a rally point on this star pad, so his Wraith may go unnoticed, especially since he's charging forward with the Mavericks first. Catches the Drakidons by surprise, one of them already gone. Will he stim to pursue it? Pulling the Mavericks away from the enemy force, the enemy base, that is something that the Shambler should be somewhat happy with. His envoy is just loaded up. A Maverick is here to tickle this base, and there's actually only Drakadins here to unload. But actually, he's unloading with an Iskator. Or no, he was unloading with the envoy. I don't think that was spotted by Mesk. His camera positioning wasn't here for it. Maybe out of the corner of his eye, he did see it. And there are, of course, there's a Watchdog over here. There's nothing else anywhere. The Wraith is over the star pad, so yeah, at this stage, the Iskator has been confirmed. Although, again, I don't know if Mesk heard it or saw it. Iquare may yet live in the unnoticed realm. Oh, now he sees it. Not quite. Not quite, buddy. But don't worry. There's more Mavericks where that came from. He can live up to Benno's legacy if he really wants to. Cyprians are on the way, and Nancy'll on the way as well. The anchor is indeed getting tickled to death. In CMBW, there is no projectile collision or anything for the Iskator, so well, it's collision in a different way, really. Yeah, I don't think that anchor is long for this universe. 12, by the way. Okay, he's starting to repair it, but only with one Mason means that the Iskator can just walk up and start shooting it again. A little bit spooky there. Doesn't even notice that he's got a Wraith. The NCL has completed. It can stand guard over the anchor to absorb 2 shots before it's completely full. Instead, the Iskator will drop over here. There you go. Redirected the projectile there, and the NCL was able to successfully hold off. Another Watchdog on the low ground, or to the bottom of the base, I should mention, as the Drakadins stand vigil over various expansion attempts. Here comes the Cyprian Anchor to do some more damage to that Iskator. And even though this is indeed tying up the Terran player quite a bit, one thing that is clearly certain is that the Sequestered Icon and Embassy combo is quite expensive, and back at home, Shambler is floating some money. Absolutely slapped, of course. The Fulcrum is completed, and we'll certainly be seeing some Goliaths as a result of that. Cyprians could load themselves into that anchor, and a whole host of units just absolutely got slapped. This Watchdog not interested in landing just yet. It lifted to prevent itself from being killed. A single Iquare. Will it really be enough for a Shambler to claim victory? A Wraith has been discovered and will indeed be being deployed as the Shambler moves his slug in various locations. The Envoy still taking some damage. 54 workers to Shambler's 36. Mesk is looking much better saturated, and his Atlas is halfway done. He's moved the Cyprian anchor a little bit closer. He could also move it even further closer, one more cell, and start tickling that Drakadin. 6 more are on the way to the front lines, and a host of Mavericks are moving their way over here to kill that one. So in the top left corner, there will soon not be any vision for the Shambler, which may sow the seeds of doubt. Additional Fulcrums on the way. Nothing out of this star pad, the Wraith still idling over it. And a Mason will follow this band of brothers as they hunt down the Drakadin. Only one of them falling. This Mason may be the thing that Shambler thinks, oh, that's the one he was using. So therefore, I've stopped the expansion attempt. But instead, he's actually going to charge forward with way more Drakadins than there are Mavericks. So at this stage, I would expect the Mason to just hug the wall and hope that the Drakadins don't find him. But actually, instead, it's the Mavericks who escape. That's kind of funny. Looks like he may have gotten a scrapyard instead of a Palladium and had to cancel. Then the Atlas will hop on over to the high ground where it's, ostensibly a little bit more effective. And the Mason did indeed die, but the Mavericks confirm no third base in that location. They can scout the middle, but it doesn't look like that's where they're going, as they intend to check the bottom right instead. A Wraith could obviously be flying around and checking bases such as this, stopping it before it gets a chance to really do anything. Phalanx on the way, but it's pretty late, and this number of Drakadins could conceivably absolutely smash this base. There's nothing in that anchor, nothing in that anchor. So, of the 4 anchors that Mesk has, 2 of them, one in a critical location to fend off a ground-based attack, is completely empty. No Sentinels either, despite having the money to afford 2 of them. One of them will be put down just here. And if Shambler opts to remain a little bit on the slower side as his second Scout Drakadin was taken care of, he could conceivably find himself in a bit of an awkward position. Now the Envoy has arrived with 2 Iquares, not just one. One of those Watchdogs is going to get absolutely slapped and will, as a result, lift off. Ah, he's starting to pull them away. The man is starting to understand. A phalanx on the high ground. Will that be enough to deal with the fact that the Icantors are loose? A couple of Mavericks die, perhaps somewhat needlessly. And the Envoy beckons them forward. Hey, put something in the anchor. You've capped the gas, but there's nothing in the anchor. He's playing dodgeball, but it's not quite working out. The phalanxes are here, though. There's not really going to be much that can be done to save the Icantors at this point. He will have to indeed lift them off with the Envoy. The Icantor is going to, or the anchor rather, is going to be repaired. One of those Iquares dangerously low at this stage. Sentinels on the way. And, of course, phalanxes. A ministry to deploy and take this base. A risky maneuver, but in theory, because it's a ministry, it will survive. Yes, there's a lot of Dracodons, but the building's got a lot of HP. And armor, for that matter. Mavericks in the anchor. Further deployments for the phalanxes. These units are on hold position, so they will end up falling back somewhat safely. Still nothing but phalanxes. No attempts at a drop with madrigals or the like. That could certainly do some damage over here. Perhaps even in the main, though there's pretty good coverage of those. And yet another Uptecton. Remember that the phalanx in siege mode has 3 additional range. You can't tell because the weapon tooltip is walked, but there's 14 range on the phalanx in deployment. Only 11 range for the Uptecton. The Sentinel on the high ground will actually have 1 extra range over the Uptecton's main gun. There's another point of reference and something to keep in mind. Mavericks keeping the mineral count low for Mesk as he takes his 3rd base. And Shambler is mostly just mining this for gas so that he can afford those more intensive units. Wraith does get swatted. Phalanx is in a bit of an awkward position here, but they will zone away additional Dracodons. WTF, he says. Good question. I wonder what he's WTFing about. Well, it's just going to be a tower creep forward for now. Sentinels out the wazoo, all over the place. Again, Uptectons outrange them on the low ground, but Phalanx has outranged Uptectons, so realistically speaking, they cover each other's backs. Nothing over here screams air units. The most that he can do is vassals, and some of them are in the queue, but I don't know that it's going to be enough. Not really a whole lot going on over here for Mesk, but he is slowly starting to expand his circle of towers and even has some madrigals, not just for anti-air, but also for anti-crowd control. Or crowd control, I suppose. There are some zealots on the way, and they can be somewhat effective against phalanxes, although once they deploy back into tank mode, they gain a lot of armor, so... Starports in the back line. You see the fountainhead, you usually associate that with either sundogs or salamanders, but also mantles do exist, and we could conceivably see those. Some Mavericks make worthy sacrifices to reveal their positions. A Sentinel will complete, but I think it'll get stamped on, and some units are actually getting pulled away based on the attack move. Actually, there's already a Sentinel completed, so maybe there's actually a hope for this base to whittle down some of those and at the very least reveal the presence of Uptectons. This stuff can all lift off anyway, so it should be just fine. Looks like watchdogs over here are going to be set up in response, and indeed, the starports are completed. What does Mesk want to do with those? It's actually going to be a commandment. 2 commandments, in fact. The significance of that is that he can start to spend his limited gas on something along the lines of, say... Uh-oh. These Uptectons are not going to be long for this world. One of them dies somewhat needlessly and doesn't even get a kill on the Phalanx for it. But the significance of the commandment is that he can use Seraphs to irradiate and Azazels to defensive matrix to heal units and prevent them from being focused down. It's actually not a bad shout, but it is a fairly gas-intensive strategy. So he's going to deploy some Phalanxes over here, but he didn't save any of the Sentinels, and that will be a mineral sink. On top of it, he really needs this gas. Shambler has the double geyser base in the middle of the map, so it's effectively as if he has 1 extra base on Mesk as far as the gas count is concerned. He's even capped the one in his main and is starting to add lattices and an engram for anti-air defense. Another Ancestral Archives for additional Uptecton production isn't going to hurt him either. Now, the Envoy can't lift off Uptectons. They're just too damn heavy, and there's no advanced transport for the Protoss yet. So it's a bit of a hole in the tech tree for the Protoss. That being said, they have other options if they really need to go do something to enemy forces on high ground and cliffs. But there is a Phalanx force that catches these Dracodons. The Uptectons are trying to do some engagements here. The Zealots are also going to be closing the gap soon. And Anseal is over here to try to prevent that, but Unfortunately for Mesk, he didn't task it on anything that would actually protect anything. But at this stage, the Dracodons are taking too much piercing damage between Sentinels and the splash damage from the Phalanx. Vultures are out, but they don't get any mines off, so instead they just die in a bit of a slapdash fashion. Piercing damage from the Madrigal when not deployed is also quite nice, but it does end up blowing up. I think the sheer number of Zealots and Uptectons are soon going to be overwhelming Mesk's position, but Shambler might not expect him to take such a strange angle of the fight. I wonder if maybe he thought that that was a different add-on than it really was, because he's queued a bunch of Wyverns for his troubles, but nothing yet doing yet for the actual commandment itself. Looks like another empty anchor ended up getting owned. Some Wyverns are here, but they will get sassed. If you use the Yanseal with the Wyvern, it's actually not too shabby whatsoever. Well, charging forward with the Uptecton just to snipe the Phalanx is also not a bad strat. Now, the Uptecton's projectile does get intercepted by things, so it's something worth noting if you wanted to maybe station some units. They don't have to have more armor than armor pen or anything, it's just flat-out interception, similar to the Valkyrie, or the Empyrean versus air units. Mavericks down here once again confirm that there's really nothing doing over in that base, but this one has eluded Mesk. Not that he doesn't know it's there, just that he can't really do anything about it. His hope is to harvest in peace over here and maybe save up enough gas that he can get up to tier 3 and use diadems or something. At this stage, I don't know if that's really in the cards. His Mavericks are going to confirm that there is still an Ichor over here. Some Wyverns, once again, are being healed up by some deployed Shamans. Additional Phalanxes have been moved to the front. And we even have some more, well, not more Sentinels, but, yeah, more Sentinels. See, I'm right. Wyverns have arrived. They're going to clean up these lesser defended Wardens. But there are vassals here, and I don't think Mesk accounted for that. That being said, there's a considerable amount of armor on the Wyvern, so I actually don't think the vassals are going to be able to do more than maybe pick one of them out. No Madrigals over in this direction either, though. Stimmed Mavericks are here, as well as some Cyprians to deal with the vassal menace. And actually, yes, indeed, his Wyverns stayed alive, very surprisingly. Valkyrie's on the way. Still nothing out of the commandment. Despite some bewilderment, I think Mesk is doing okay. He's adding a Sentinel for anti-ground forces over here and still has the Phalanxes to deploy, but I'm not really sure that he's going to be insulated against a significant ground army. The Archon heads here as well, and I don't really know if there's enough of a front line, but the Wyverns can start to harass it from a range, and they might even be able to snipe some of these Acantors. Indeed, they will. They'll even sight the Archon, start to fall back as the Archon gives chase. One of the Wyverns does fall, but the Archon, narrowly, does not end up getting it. It'll take, what is that? 10 seconds, 10 shields per second, so 45 seconds thereabouts to actually get the Archon fully shielded. Uptectons. They're doing their darndest. They're even giving us a little bit of a FBI open up kind of moment. The Wyverns are here to peel for the presence of the Phalanxes, and they're even going to start tickling the Uptectons, but there's enough sustained power here that, unfortunately for Mesk, I don't know that the Uptectons are going to be destroyed by the Wyverns anytime soon. He has decided to get rid of the commandments after queuing up Azazels, so that'll be it for him, and he'll go into rotaries almost certainly, if he bothers to do that at all, because maybe he just wants to bank the gas. This Sentinel is not long for the world, but it does end up lifting off to save itself, and the Wyverns are once again trying to zone. But there's enough Uptectons here that they can actually fight back. They don't deal no damage, it's just that they deal far less damage than they would otherwise, and the multi-target certainly doesn't help. The thing that they're most vulnerable towards is actually something like a Minotaur, or perhaps some other heavy air. Gazithalors come to mind, actually. One of the Shamans gets sniped. More Wyverns, as well as some Azazels. Defensive Matrix can certainly serve him well. And the extra 4 castle armor, as well as the, based on the positioning here. But Wyverns are uniquely not synergizing with 4 castle, because they don't always face their targets, since they can fire while moving. So even in a dead-on fight, you have to kind of kite towards your opponent instead of away. It's an interesting composition. Poses interesting challenges. But at this stage, Shambler has 5 bases, the 5th admittedly just now being set up, but still, something significant. Shambler is just not sure how the gun works, I think. I guess he's talking about when there's ground targets, but those ground targets are not going to be as high priority to the internal AI as the air units are. Daedalus on the way. Tier 3 in the sights of Mesk. Can he hold out long enough? This base was able to stay alive for very long, and as a result, he could even take this one in the bottom right. Shambler's been typing too much to really check there, it seems. Or just in general, been engrossed with the idea of using just this unit composition and no others. He's got 3 Optectons at a time coming out. An ocean of vassals. A couple Cyprians will deal with that, no problem. There's also Valkyries, so... An Envoy even jumps in, but it's empty. He goes for a mad dash, throwing everything he has at this problem, but the Cyprians and the Anchor survive. And that may alone be enough. Lobster mines. Yes, lobster mines. They've detonated. They're lobsters when they attack your own units. D-Matrix out of the Azazels will keep them healthy, and now the Optectons are in a really rough spot. They were off to the left side, so they wouldn't have even had the range to deal with this on the right side. Definitely in an awkward position there. Four HP Optecton. Don't let it escape, Mesk. Your mission, should you choose to accept it. Oh, you failed. But don't worry, there are simulacra here. Well, the Optectons are still here, and they're still happily shooting the entire time. This is not a very cost-efficient way to get rid of Wyverns, by the way. Optectons are really quite significant in terms of their cost. Might not be the tool for the job here versus the Air Menace. The Daedalus is nearly complete, and Mesk has banked enough resources for a single diadem. I think that alone might end up salting Shambler's stake here. He is going to go for Archons instead of continuing the gas expenditure. There is a base in the top left as well, though. Like I said, Shambler going up to 5. Mesk still only on 3. Does have a treasury that he could port over to the bottom right as soon as he has the awareness to, and he still hasn't capped this geyser either, so his gas income isn't what it necessarily could be, but a diadem is already on the way, and another one he's got the resources for. Some rates will maybe confer some sort of vision. Iron Foundry on the low ground. Not a bad shout. Might be able to use some Paladins or even Cuirasses to absorb a decent amount of the damage dealt by the Optectons. Many more Wyverns have arrived. I've already replaced their Wyvern frame, thanks to June 3 Hong. But that's only on pre-release. Engrams over on this side to try to protect from the Wyvern Menace. But I think with the Diadem nearly complete, the Wraiths can spot and see what they can find. I don't actually think the Diadem can attack anything over here. And I could be wrong about that. Now, the Wyverns are going to fly directly into the Optectons, and there are enough of them that they can very easily just absolutely slap things. Vultures are here to try to occupy the attention of some of these units, put their weapons on cooldown, and etc. There's some Valkyries as well, but there are no air units coming. The Diadem does indeed fire a shot, and it's enough to deal a little bit of damage here to these Optectons. They are going to kite backwards towards the ion field, and, well, one of them doesn't quite die, but there is a Simulacrum that dies instead. And some Vultures get slapped. Shambler's typing, boys. Mesk can win. He can win as Terran. He can win as his worst race. The Shambler is in shambles. Will the Pazuzus be enough? I actually don't know if they will, but some quarry, a quarry, is training some Masons in the bottom right-hand side. A vassal furiously charges forth, and the Wraith accepts it. Only to die. A horrible death. Oh, the engram. Honestly, like, Shambler should be able to close, but I am not quite sure how he's planning on doing that. There's only one diadem right now, as far as I've seen. Yeah, there's not another one on the way. He certainly could benefit from having another one. Ooh! A couple Drakodins end up getting slapped. Here comes another mad charge. The Archons doing their best to take the force, but oh, that's a really meaty diadem shot on a whole host of those Archons. Will it be enough? D-Matrix on the Phalanx, not a bad choice, considering the fact that they can indeed force off a lot of this fight. All of the Archons are now dead. It's up to the Wyverns to deal with the Uptectons, as well as, obviously, the single surviving Azazel, and some tactical lag. We love ourselves some tactical lag. The Uptecton is indeed going to get slapped. Now, this treasury may indeed fall. Yes, it does. It's going to be a momentary inconvenience, but the worker count is still okay for Mesk. No! No, not the Wyverns! Oh, goodness. Only one of them died, I think. But goodness gracious, that was very, very close. Oh, dear. Well, a ministry has been started on the position. I really... Yeah, I am not so sure that it's as black and white as Shambler's making it out to be. The man has such an incredible macro advantage. I don't know what more he really wants or needs to deal with the fact that there's a whole bloody host of things going in his favor. Perhaps just his unfamiliarity with facing Terran in this state. I don't think he's ever played against Wyverns before, at least not as Protoss. However, they are all going to explode to a double engram, so Mesk is offering him an opportunity to come back into the game, and just didn't end up reacting a little, fast enough. The Azazel is going to be quite effective at providing some D-Matrixes here, but I don't know that it's going to be enough. Maybe if he had done that a little bit ahead of time or scouted ahead to figure out what was there, he could have done something. Well, he is going to go ahead and continue to D-Matrix things. Shambler is trying to micro, but it's not going to be enough. There's only one engram and nothing else here to help. It's a total disaster, but Archons are here. Archons! The ministry is complete. The reservoir needs to be redone. There's a diadem down here on the low ground. There's a bunch of vital masons. The Pazuzus are huddled around the ministry for warmth, and the air units have mostly escaped. One more Wyvern did die bravely, and there are no defenses here to stop this force from slowly whittling away at all of Well, there is a Wyvern, or an engram down here, rather. Without his Azazels, what will he do now? He actually rebuilt one of his commandments just so he can make more of them. Hey, I respect it. The Pazuzus are doing their darndest to see what's going on over here. Another Wraith, or maybe a Valkyrie flyover even, would be great to get these diadems into the action here and start shellacking the Wardens. Oh, dear. There's some cloggery happening. A lot of Archons trying to get different places. Shambler making some additional very bold statements. He's just I think he's broken, guys. Honestly, I think it might be over, even though Mesk is still on the losing end of this, because there's just nothing like Shambler is he's stuck permatyping. He's stuck typing, boys. All right, there's an attempted wall here, but no, never mind. It was just that. Valkyries are here. A Cuirass is here. The diadem is being focused down. Is it going to be enough? I think there's enough sentinels here to force them back. Indeed there are, and the diadems are force targeting on the Patriarchs, or maybe that's just chance. Either way, the Archons were not successful in doing more than just some superficial damage to the worker count. What happened to the other Iron Foundry? Did it fly all the way back home? It did. Okay. We got some more tactical lag. At least it was after the fight. I think I saw... Okay, it's future stations. He's going to go for probably Penumbra. I think if he goes for Penumbra alongside Azazel's, he can safeguard against a lot of the friendly damage. There's also a nanite assembly being built, and remember that Mesk is indeed on 3 bases. He's still not capped his gas in his natural. He's starting to cap the gas in that base, and maybe he'll think about doing that in his natural again, since it was destroyed a long time ago. Shambler hasn't capped the gas in his 3rd base. I don't know if he's even capped the gas in his 4th or... Yeah, he did it in his 4th, but not in his 5th. And this base has gone unnoticed for a very long time. Only now are there going to be some defenses there. So it's not as bleak as it looks, economically speaking, for Mesk. But at the same time, with fleet beacons coming down, a tech switch is on the way. This SIP sponsored by Shambler, actually. He does donate. Thanks, homie. He donates his keyboards every now and then, too, but mostly donates his money, I think. A recent acquisition, you could say. Yeah, indeed, it will be Penumbra. What we could actually see is a bit of a Doom drop, where you go for a Pythian and load, like, I think you can load 2 Penumbra? I don't remember how many Penumbras you can load, but it's some decent number. Drakatans are going to be on the way, but a Diadem can certainly help out down here, and on top of it all, there are Sentinels. So I'm actually not sure how well that's going to go over. The Valkyries are over here to assist, but some of them are very vulnerable, so I wouldn't be surprised if Vassals end up slapping them. Yeah, one of them instantly dies, another one not long for this world, but the rest of them should be okay. At the same time, the Diadem aggroed the units down here, so they're going to get slapped. A Seraph over here. There's also an Anvil, and Shambler should have spotted that with his various units, so I think he's actually going to be okay. Being zoned away based on the Diadem. These Sentinels are going to be on the way as well, and... Well, he's going to go in after the fact. But the Sentinels take off a good chunk of the units, the Archons in general. The shields are not necessarily long for this world, but some of the angles of attack are benefiting the Shambler more than they are benefiting Mesk. Sentinels can't really get a lot of their splash damage dealt onto a single unit. Pretty soon, there's not really going to be anything left to hold this base on the bottom right. That being said, the Archons are indeed dying, and the Wyverns are going to be soon to follow. Now, here come the Wyverns. Treasury is going to theoretically evacuate. Oh no! Does he see it? He does, okay. Barely gets out in time. One of these Archons is fairly low in terms of shields. Mostly at this point just trying to spot for the Diadem, but it's too busy dealing with stuff back here. There's still more Sentinels, though. It's not going to be quite enough. And if he can get a Valkyrie down here to clean up the Vassals, he can just go back to mining to some degree. But at the same time, a missile launch has been detected, and it's in the top left. Shambler sees it, but is it going to be soon enough for him to do anything about it? The initial damage of the nuclear missile, or the Morningstar as it's now called, is not really the main concern at this point. It's just getting irradiated. And perhaps getting salty. For Shambler, that is indeed a concern. More Sentinels being set up. Another position for the Drakadan, and a Cuirass repairing itself, slowly but surely. Just barely out of range on the Diadem. Well, his Empyreans and Clarions are in a specific position here to potentially punish getting additional fleet beacons. Diadems getting spotted by... targets for the Diadems getting spotted by the Seraphs, and a Valkyrie is still here to deal with the Vassals.
Missile launch detected.
Absolutely slapped. Irradiating the resource line means that there's really not going to be an opportunity for Shambler to safely harvest again, so there is that. Additional shots are happening thanks to the Diadems. Just barely out of range to irradiate the Nexus itself, it seems. Claymore was produced. Penumbra was also produced. What does Mesk want to do? Why even both? You say that, but the nuke absolutely annihilated your zealots. Can't say that about a diadem. Oh, here comes the Seraph. Still no anti-air over here, but there is a zealot to watch the nuke go off. Shambler's continuing to get tilted. Now, there's only one Penumbra here, and additional ones were not made. A couple of Valkyries exist, but not in very vast quantities. There is a Magnetar, as well as a Hippogriff, so this base will be destroyed for good, it seems. Vassal's enchanting the Empyreans. Obviously, that's going to be somewhat helpful. Now that's a juicy target, but I think the Scribes are going to evacuate just fine. Mostly just going to distract Shambler from the presence of the Penumbra. Valkyries are going to be tasked onto the target. The Cuirass! The Cuirass taking all of the initial aggro. Here come the Clarions to take up the brunt of the splash damage from the Penumbra, and one of them even ends up getting owned. The nuke does indeed claim the lives of many Scribes. How many, we can't exactly be sure. Seraph remaining idle over here. The Penumbra being chased. The Valkyries doing their best to deal some damage. And the Clarion now out of vision for the initial shot. Here comes a Sundog, as well as some more Valkyries. Azazel to keep the units healthy and protected. And Shambler, rage quits. Giving Mesk a tie series. And no, I'm not talking about Thailand. Nemesis Station! That's where we'll finish this series off. Absolute slappening is occurring. Absolute sassening is occurring. And at this stage, the Shambler is one rage quit away from not making it to the grand finals. Can you believe it? Surely Mesk can't upset another player. My God, man. My God. I'm gonna go get some water. Yeah. Okay. In fairness to Shambler, it could be that he's not familiar with how uptectons work versus air units and ground units in the same area, and how, like, usually air units are higher priority. And maybe you could even construe that as a bug that we should genuinely take a look at. So the unfamiliarity of that may have set him off, or just made him a little bit confused, and as a result, he didn't have the full focus to change his tactics earlier. But he had 5 bases, and at any point he could have crushed the life of the 3rd base, and then the 4th base that Mesk eventually took. Of course, he eventually could have also taken the other double gas base, and extended his lead, economically speaking, even further. But at this stage, really, what can you expect? I was going to say just waiting on Mesk, but I actually don't know if Shambler's back. Hey, I think it's because, honestly, it must have been because of the typing and the tilts. Like, what the fuck, this unit isn't working like I feel like it should. And again, maybe he's even right about that. But, you know, StarCraft is a jank game, and Cosmonarchy Brood War inherits some of that jank. As much jank as we've fixed, I'm sure we have some more left to do. So it might be less jank than Brood War, but it's still going to be somewhat jank. And just in that context alone, you kind of have to accept that as the cost of doing business. And of course, if there is a way that we can improve the jank, we will certainly try. That's, in fact, why we extended selection to begin with. So I honestly think, at this stage, Shambler just needs to take some deep breaths, refocus, and reframe what is happening. Sure, he may suffer some embarrassment at the hand of IskatuMesk, but honestly, Nemesis Station. It's a map that has seen more play recently. Shambler is in a spot where he might be able to do something. At the very least, he might be able to play Standard and absolutely annihilate Mesk. In fact, I don't know if Mesk has a really good track record on this particular map. But I suppose he probably did. Did he defeat DF on this map? I can't remember if this was a map that he won or lost on. No, this was the Nemesis Station was the first map that opened up the series against DF, and that's the one that he lost at. So Mesk doesn't have a great track record here. Oh, yes, for sure, Alexander. Mesk is notorious for playing long games and, like, at about an hour or an hour and a half in going God mode, because everybody else, by comparison, has just fallen asleep or something. Maybe once we get to the point where we can deal with all of the various hash errors, he'll be A-okay. Unfortunately, I don't think Shambler is capable of resetting exactly. So if he wins, it has to be because Mesk ends up throwing at the ultimate hour, or otherwise just ends up crumbling to early pressure, or something goes wrong in the early game. Goodness. The Shambler is going to need to be a hard man in the rear if he wants to defeat IskatuMesk. It's gone to Game 5. Both of the series that Mesk has played in have gone to Game 5. If he wins here, he has to contend with Mystery Meat. And that series, my friends, is going to be taking place at midnight local time in about 2 hours from now, actually. So you can imagine my surprise when I realize I have to stay up that late. But it's worth it. It's worth it for the historic experience of being able to cast Mesk. Absolutely salt the wound. Now, he has rolled Protoss. In the last Protoss versus Protoss match, the Shambler came out on top. That was on Nitro Valley. This map is a little bit more straightforward. There's not going to be any scouting shenanigans, and it doesn't look like Shambler is too interested in doing anything other than a gateway opener. No, we'll see what possesses Mesk. It looks like he's going to do the same thing, actually. Shambler's even going to cut a worker a little bit to get his gateway out earlier, but that's the only real change in significance so far. I guess another thing to point out is that depending on where Mesk actually puts his gateway... Oh, there you go. It's off to the side. This is a really reasonable position for your gateway. It does mean that you've got a nice open area to move Drakodins through. In this particular context, Shambler's just building by his base. He's not really expecting to be attacked, I think. If I can read into the early building positions at all, it's to expect that we're going to see, Shambler on the offensive in the early stages, and he's not really planning on being able to defend, whereas Mesk is thinking a little bit more about accepting the aggression of Shambler and being able to play around it. So the gateway's complete. A pylon over here for SAS. Dracodon halfway done. And the cancel in a timely manner will allow a Dracodon to be started over here and continuing scribe production. Nothing too crazy over here just yet. Mesk will be ahead by like half a worker or so. Gonna go ahead and scout the extremities of his base to make sure he's not being cheesed, but the scribe has just not arrived yet. It took a very long and circuitous route. In fact, based on the Dracodon positioning, Shambler might not even be able to scout the second gateway, but it looks like he'll get there just in time. He'll even get to scout how many workers were harvesting resources, but I didn't see Shambler's camera over there at that moment. He does recall his own Dracodon and is intending to do a gateway expand, or so I thought before he drops the Cenotaph. Not interested in a fast expand. Maybe feels like it would be a little bit too greedy. The second gateway is indeed on the way for Mesk, though, and he's got an idle scribe here, going for a Cenotaph of his own. Currently, fully saturated, well, 2 out of 3 workers on the Geyser, but the third is, 2.5, really, in terms of efficiency. So it looks like Shambler will have a little bit more of a gas deficit compared to Mesk, since he's not harvesting from the ridge. We'll see if that really makes a significant difference here. Shambler's actually caught up in workers because Mesk has fallen behind in making sure that he hits the Q key, because it's not P for probe. It's Q if you use grid hotkeys for scribe. I will remind you all, when Mesk joined the lobby just now, he said, meme magic. I don't think he believes he's winning. But he is on track to do the reverse sweep. This could be it. For all the marbles. It certainly is it for all the marbles, let's be real. The double Cenotaph pumping non-stop Legionnaires is potentially a problem for Shambler because there's enough Dracodons here to do serious damage to them. If you consider the fact that there's, 120 effective HP and obviously no armor for the Legionnaire, then it really only takes, what is this? 2 salvos of 1 focus fire, Like if you focus fire one of them, it takes 2 shots to kill the Legionnaire. That's assuming, Mesk is good enough with his micro, and also assuming they meet on open ground, because at this stage the Dracodons are guarding the ramp. But as soon as I say that, of course, we are going to have a bit of a move out. The Hierophant is in the lead here, because it obviously is the faster unit, but it needs to start falling back immediately, and instead is just going to get absolutely stepped on. Again, the kite back is pretty effective if you can focus fire. Even with only 3, he's doing reasonable damage to thin the herd. He should be able to pick off 1 more if he does good focus fire, but he's not quite doing that. Maybe if he had pulled the units down this direction, he could have denied their ability to... He's just being annoying. He's doing his best to be annoying. That hole should probably be sealed up in retrospect, but that's something we can do ahead of the next tournament. Well, Mesk doesn't really quite know where to put a static defense structure, so he's going to drop his warden there. If he had a pylon over here, you imagine he would have put it there, but that's not exactly what happened. 4 Dracodons against 4 Dracodons, with obviously... Well, actually, it's going to be 5. So this will be Mesk favored, for sure. He's even going to go ahead and sit here on hold position. The Legionnaires think about attacking, but instead one of them will just get slapped. More are on the way, but I'm not so sure he can break this position. He doesn't have enough Dracodons. And some of his other units are sitting here idling as he takes his expansion. A little bit ahead of schedule for Mesk, of course, or compared to Mesk, I should say. Mesk himself, not quite sure what to get next. Saving up a decent amount of minerals. Could he go for a grand library, perhaps? We'll find out shortly. It's a prostration stage. Okay. Seeing the Legionnaire committal from Shambler, Pariahs will do absolute wonders against that unit. But, unfortunately for him, he's caught off guard, and his Zealot was not able to take the initial aggro. So the Drakodins will get focused down very early. The Hierophant was not leading the charge either. This could be fatal if he's not careful. Legionnaires are surprisingly volatile in these early matchups. But this Zealot has allowed free reign to fight the Drakodin in that context. So now the Legionnaire is dead, the Zealot is still alive, and the Warden, albeit not very well placed, is in a position to potentially do some damage. There's only one pylon here, and the Hierophant is starting to get tickled to death. But there are more Drakodins on the way. I think maybe, just maybe, Mesk can come back. He's going to go ahead and keep his pylon, or his Warden and Cenotaph powered. And will he be able to immediately order up a Pariah? I don't think so. Drakodin does die immediately. The Warden is up and running, but that pylon is starting to get focused down, and yeah, he posted it way farther back than he really wanted it to be, I think. The Scribe pull is going to be good to start focusing down some of the Legionnaires, but at this stage, he's got nothing making in the prostration stage. The Gateway's a wreck. Couple of workers down, but it's not the end of the world. I think Shambler is going to be very committed to trying to kill his opponent in that context, so another Warden is going to go down. Drakodins do finish. Scribes are going to go ahead and continue the tickling. One more shot will do it for that Drakodin. And then with the help of some Scribes, I think this Drakodin will be just fine. Obviously, they need to get back to mining as soon as possible, and Mesk is also not actually building any additional workers, so he's going to be down 5 for a little bit. At this level of play, that's not necessarily a death knell. But an Embassy with a Cantor, no doubt, going to be queued up soon. This Nexus completely left barren for now, and these Scribes also not too interested in going back to work. So, for all intents and purposes, he's only got 18 workers mining. Well, make that 17. Scribe going to go ahead and drop a pylon over here. Clearly needs to find a better spot for his static defense if he wants to hold on here. A Warden on the back line, that's going to be in a much better position. And it's down to base layout. A Pariah. About 40 seconds or 50 seconds on that bad boy. Is Shambler going to give him enough time? Iquare drop nearly assembled. And third base on the way, and getting the gas from his natural. So Shambler is in a commanding position yet again. I'm not even sure a Pariah would help Mesk at this stage, although he can definitely do some pretty good damage to things like the Cantord when it comes in. Not quite on the way just yet, though. Focusing on this front line. Drakodins are slowly falling. The Warden is taking pot shots at things like the Legionnaires. Is it going to be enough? The Pariah finishes and makes a mad dash towards the Hierophant, dealing plenty of splash damage along the way to things like the Ecclesiast. And off it goes. Doing his best to fall back, but I'm not sure that it's going to be enough. He barely might escape. The Legionnaire's wrath, unfortunately, it pops and is not able to be healed by flash shielding. A lot of money went into that Pariah, and he's queued so many Zealots desperately. At this stage, the Acantor need only walk across the map before another Pariah is trained. That being said, it's a very heavy concentration of power. I'm not so sure that the Envoy will be there in time, but it could conceivably happen. The Legionnaires starting to get tickled on the way out. Mostly just shields, though. They remain intact overall. Does Mesk suspect the presence of an Acantor drop? He needs to immediately react, and I don't think he's going to. He's only lost one worker so far, but there goes 3 more. And the response is 2 shots too late. A total of 5 lost so far. Make that 6. And the Acantor is starting to get attacked by the Pariah. An attempt at moving around with the Micro is not too shabby in theory, but unfortunately for Mesk, he doesn't dodge the shot in time. And the front gates are now once again under duress. However, the Pariah can start to close the gap. It did get him down to about half HP, and that splash did hit the Envoy. So at this stage, the Acantor is toast. But so is the Pariah. They kill each other in the final moments. There's so many Legionnaires here. The Zealots are not in a position to exactly start moving. Well, they could start to hold position to stop the Legionnaires from charging in, but of course there is also the charge. It's so unfortunate for Mesk. because his pariahs died at the last possible second in both occasions. If they had stayed alive and used their shields, he could have maybe had a chance. The scribes also could have stuck around and maybe hold the fort a little bit longer, but it feels like maybe at that point the bleeding was just too much. And that, my friends, will be the end of IskatuMesk in Ascension number 3. Making it to the final hurdle, but not quite enough, it seems. A sycophant will certainly not be enough, and he is now down by just about 30 workers. Make that definitely over 30, as a matter of fact. He's holding on hope. Building additional sycophants, it's not really what he needs, but... Double ancestral archives, a third base, starting to mine gas from. The Shambler is definitely in a commanding position. And I will note, he has not bothered to scout the entire map at any stage here, so... I'm not so sure that he's as sure as I am, but with no pariahs here to accept this Acantor drop, it feels like it's an inevitability. The front gates are once again going to be stormed. There's no Matrix in sight, and certainly no crowd control. Well then, Drakadin is going to be on that general direction. Unfortunately, here comes the Legionnaires to the front gates, while the Drakadin is trying its best to dance around, and there's no static defense to accept the front gates either. So despite microing his poor little heart out, he's still got to shoot through so much, and in the same time, his base is under siege. Never quite went back to mining enough gas to accrue the sufficient funds for the pariah, so he'll kill Iquare, but that's about it. I hope Shambler's ready to dust off his keyboard once more, because he's going to need a new one with all the typing he did earlier in the series. Insult added to injury, but it's not enough to fell the great Shambler, for he proceeds to the grand finals almost assuredly. How can Mesk possibly think he's still in the game? That's my question. With only 6 workers to almost 69. Wait for it. Wait for it. Shambler? Oh my god, he made 3 at once. Fucker, I was going to screenshot at 69 workers. What an ass. Well, I suppose in a tournament setting, it's simply not over until it's over. But let me be the first to tell you, it's over. There's an ocean of Legionnaires about to descend on Mesk's base, and he does not have the funds to do anything about it. Ah, Blizzard finds a path. Well, at least the Shambler's in a better mood, so maybe he won't be so typeful when he faces off against the Mystery Meat Menace later today. Well, technically tomorrow, but you guys know what I mean. No pariahs. No life. GG. And Mesk falls at the final hurdle, providing Shambler the access into the grand finals. If he had gotten Terran, he might have actually been okay, funnily enough. I feel like his Protoss is pretty good, but against Shambler specifically, again, even then, it was just moments away from being effective. He killed an Acantor with 1 Drakadin. It is true. He would win this game if he had feet. Yeah, that's true. Well, boys, at the very least, this might mean that Mesk can join me for the casts, but we'll find out the answer to that question at around midnight local time. Again, that's less than 2 hours from now, so we'll see you boys then. And once again, if you like Cosmonarchy Brood War, well, there are some links in the bottom right. You can get the mod, join us on Discord, or support us on Ko-fi. And beyond that, make sure that you don't